London calling YouTube, London calling everyone. And tonight I'm once again joined by my friend Koki Pirate.
It's hot. Hello.
Hello. And the absolutely wondrous, the radiant, the brilliant, the often missed, because we need you on YouTube more, Old Vampire.
Oh gosh, hello.
And the indescribable schizophrenic queen.
Yodelay-hoo.
Exactly, I was just thinking that. So, another kind of, a sort of follow-up, really, because stories on this are coming thick and fast. In previous editions of London After Midnight, we've talked about same-sex marriage in the UK, we've talked about the Church of England's place in the British establishment, whether the Church of England is out of touch, whether we need it, why is it still part of our legislature, why does the monarchy why does the monarch still have to be a religious figure if we're to have a monarch at all? In fact, I was talking to Gunderson recently also about the second chamber, because he has been studying politics and he doesn't want there to be a House of Lords at all. He just thinks the second chamber could be scrapped. I would say the second chamber should just be like a jury system of all the lawyers in the UK, and should be representative in terms of age, in terms of class, race, gender, etc. Whereas the situation currently is, for example, as we mentioned before, 27 Anglican bishops, unelected in the House of Lords, part of the legislature. We still got same-sex marriage through. We've had conflict in the UK because we have same-sex marriage, have done for a month now, but not in Anglican canon law, which refuses to recognise this. If an Anglican vicar so much as blesses a same-sex union, they will be fired. But there's conflict, because we have in the UK a government that was chosen by the Queen, effectively, because what we do, if we have a dead heat, like you guys did with Gore and Bush, a decade ago, what we do is we activate the Queen, which sounds like she's some kind of cyborg that kind of gets up and just starts stomping around London, lasering people. But no, we activate...
That's what I assumed. Along
yes.
with the dragon slaying and such.
Exactly. We activated the Queen, and she chose this deal, which is what we call Con Dem, which means the Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrats, who actually came third in the election, formed a government together. And what's been happening in the past week or so is our Prime Minister, David Cameron, has been talking like an American politician. He won't stop talking about God. He's called the United Kingdom a quote-unquote Christian nation. And Nick Clegg is calling for a totally secular United Kingdom, which also embraces multiculturalism. He doesn't want the monarch to be a religious figure anymore. In fact, he wants the disestablishment of the Church of England. And so the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister are actually disagreeing publicly. Hooray! And Nick Clegg, I think, is right for once. Now, obviously, over there in the US, you have separation of church and state anyway, but it doesn't seem to stop the strong religious nutjob element having a lot of power, a lot of say. I don't know what this is like from a Puerto Rican perspective, but I spent 4 minutes introducing the topic. So, Koki, your thoughts on this?
Well, something about separation of church and state is that it's a two-way street. Knowing that there is a state church in the United Kingdom had me a bit more optimistic about the Anglican Church coming around on things like same-sex marriage and, being more accommodating for more people, simply on the basis that it is a state church and it should embrace, the values of the nation. Otherwise, can you even call it a state church? So I suppose a potential downside is that if you disestablish the Anglican Church, they may be more prone to cling on to some of their conservative values and less likely to, move as laws move. That being said, I do think that the separation of church and state is important. I really have no idea what the role the monarchy should play in UK politics, if any, like, part of me wants to think of the monarchy as a purely religious figure simply because I don't like the idea of endorsing monarch as sort of a secular figure. You know, it'd be like a secular monarch strikes me as like a secular baptism, I guess, which you could conceivably do, but, you know, I guess it's something that I had never really conceived of. So I suppose most monarchs aren't also the major religious figures. I'm sorry, I'm just sort of rambling. What I mean to say is that there's a lot to gain, but there's also some stuff to lose. You know, I'd hate to see, like, the Anglican Church revert, you know, to some of their more conservative principles now that they consider themselves, you know, free of the state, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think the current Archbishop, whose name I think it's Tony Welby. I may have got that name wrong. Sorry, folks. I think he's very much talking like a politician. You know, he's treading the line. He's being careful. He's not nailing his colours to the mast. I'm also actually something you said made me wonder. When was the last time a British monarch actually claimed the divine right to rule? I might want to look that up. But I mean, yeah, the Queen as both a secular and a religious figure. Well, actually, that came up in some previous shows, because I think sometimes it's like, when I change my hat, my views change. It becomes a bit sort of, not that she says much anyway, of course, but maybe that's the wisest course of action, because there's actually a lot of confusion over this. But for example, Tony Blair, back when he was Prime Minister, insisted that the head of the Church of England was the Queen. And some other people said that the head of the Church of England is the Archbishop of Canterbury. So the government got in touch with the Archbishop of Canterbury, well, the then Archbishop of Canterbury, said, who is the head of the Church of England? And he said, Jesus Christ. And they got in touch with the palace, and because obviously you can't actually ask the Queen a direct question, but they got an answer somehow. So,
I was under the impression that they actually went to Jesus Christ to verify, but never mind, go on.
Worth a try, but the answer that came back, that according to the Queen, the head of the Anglican Church is Jesus Christ. So, everybody, like most British people, if you'd asked them, if they didn't think it was the Queen, would have thought it was the Archbishop of Canterbury. And so it's a bit like, what? I'm supposed to be the head of the... No, Jesus Christ is the head of the Church of England. So you've basically got a hierarchy. It's kind of like a ladder leading to the clouds. Because there is...
like some North Korea stuff now, I mean. How do the people feel about having some foreigner as the head of their church?
Yes, and I think the thing is, generally, if you're part of like some kind of organisation or something and you have a grievance, you can complain. But if I was still an Anglican and I've got a complaint or a question, I've got to take it. If I wanted to go to the very top, it's got to go to Jesus Christ. So it's sort of like anybody else can be deferential. So I don't know, ask Jesus.
Yeah, well, you know, Jesus has a way of always agreeing with you, whoever happens to be talking to him.
That's very true, actually. In fact, I was on the blower to Jesus today, and he said he's completely cool with same-sex marriage. He thinks it rocks.
Yes.
Yeah, he did it 12 times, man. But, yeah, no, this really makes me think of Kim Il-sung as the head of North Korea, having some person from, you know, generations ago running the church seems interesting.
Yeah. Well, old vampire, how much faith do you have in Jesus Christ's efficiency in running a 21st century church?
I don't know. The thing is, it's hard to get a hold of him. You know, I mean, individually people can talk to him, but he always has something different to say to everybody. So, you know, unless he's able to join a group of people, I just don't. I can't see it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone remember that cat that's mayor of a town in Alaska?
Oh yeah. Well,
Best
yeah. To be
mayor ever.
Yeah, to be fair though, didn't Alaska once have Sarah Palin as governor? So for them to be governor, a cat has to be a step up.
Step up, yes.
Queenie, your thoughts?
Well, obviously, being a hedonistic, unwashed American infidel, I don't know a lot about British politics, but as someone who is not Christian, I'd say a secular governance would have the potential to be more fair towards the masses, especially those of who were not part of the popular religion. But living in a country that's supposed to be secular and sometimes struggles with religious ideologies in the government, I believe that if it were to be secular, that I hope that you would do a better job than us unwashed American masses in enforcing a separation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically like if you can work it out right and actually enforce it, I think it would be a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see it happening anytime soon, unfortunately. We've got Clegg saying this, but he's, let's face it, only going to be there for another year. What Labour would do, because anything we've tried to do in terms of electoral reform recently has been kind of disastrous, and I think the same would be true. I don't see it being well handled, that much of a kind of overhaul. But okay, I'm going to open up the floor for any closing questions.
Oh, I was just going to say that the U.S., while there is a separation between church and state in the Constitution, it should be noted that every once in a while they will be asked to provide chaplains for the military or for prison or something like that, and in which case they have to accommodate for all religions. Even if it is on the tax dollar. And I think they also have some humanist chaplains and pagan chaplains and, of all sorts of different religions. So, I kind of get behind the whole idea of the government having a place in religion so long as it's equally accommodating to believers and non-believers and believers of all faiths, which, because it is a service that citizens are going to be using, whether you like it or not. So, but at the same time, I do think separation between church and state is a good idea for the state. I'm just afraid what it might do to the church.
Yeah, I can even imagine that a separated Church of England, I think there'd be schisms. I think it would be like the Catholic Church. There'd be, or in Catholic Church's history, there'd be breakaway groups. As you say, there'd be extremists. But positive in a way, in that at least you can go to the liberal progressive version and, have things like same-sex marriage and what have you. I should imagine there are still Anglicans who are angry over there being women vicars, even though it's been like 20 years since they changed that so women can be vicars. So they'd go back, they'd revert and say, no, women can't do this, women can't do that. Okay, I think we've covered that topic. So, a good night from Koki.
Hamster of prosperity upon your heads.
And a good night from Vampire.
Good night, everybody.
And good night from Queenie.
Blessings to you from the Flying Spaghetti Monster, and may you be touched by his noodly appendage.
I suspect that there will one day be tensions between those who follow the Hamster of Prosperity and those who follow the Flying Spaghetti Monster. But you'll have to tune in for that next time, folks. And in the meantime, good night from me.